joyous today. We're in this beautiful space. I'm here with teachers that I admire and respect, and administrators. So the first thing I want to do is really shout out to Mr. Bueller, Mr. Relusco, and Mr. Vaca for really organizing this. These events, I believe, are really important. It helps to make those connections, to bridge, like, later on in life with what you're doing today. But it's an especially nice day for me, joyous day, because this is my brother, who I haven't seen in how many years?
A little while.
Yeah, it's been a while. He lives out in Utah, and I'm not gonna steal his thunder. He's gonna talk with you today about what he does. This is so fun for me to have my brother here to talk to you about his own journey. So I do want to say it is my privilege and pleasure to introduce today's guest speaker, Dr. Michael Blinn. Dr. Blinn will talk with you today about his academic and professional journey as an aeronautical engineer. Dr. Blinn has worked both in the private and the public sector, and his work involves the aerodynamic performance of aircraft and construction materials. Dr. Blinn's research for his PhD was in the area of metal fatigue, way beyond my pay grade, okay? But I do come from a long line of engineers, so like I get this. I've grown up with it. My dad was a nuclear engineer, so we have lots of engineers in my family. So Dr. Blinn is here today to help make that real-world connection between your academic study and how to apply that to life beyond Mohan. For many of you, the timing of this presentation is strategic, as you are planning your futures, looking into college programs, taking your PSATs, and really thinking about academic courses of study and where you're going to do it. So I did want to say that Dr. Blinn had humble beginnings. We come from a low-income, single-parent household, and we grew up locally. He started his academic journey at SUNY Schenectady, formerly known as SCCC. That's where he started. So my message to you today is this: never, never be stopped by humble beginnings. We all start somewhere. It's the vision of where you are going and the effort you are willing to put forth that matters. Okay? So with that said, please give a warm #MohanProud welcome to Dr. Blinn.
So thank you, Diane, and everybody. Very much appreciated. Can everybody hear me okay? I think the acoustics here are pretty good, probably designed as such. So again, the topic is, so you want to be an engineer? And kind of advancing forward. So Diane mentioned a few things, but a little bit about me. I'm pretty old, kind of getting there. I'm in my late 50s now. So just to give somebody a reference frame, graduated from Burnt Hills High School. You guys know about Burnt Hills? 1978. Yikes. That was a while ago, right? So then again, brother of Diane, as she mentioned, and again, Burnt Hills, and that was in what we call the olden days, right? Or back in the day, and it was way before most of the folks here were born. So it's quite a while ago. So Diane mentioned went to college around here, and again, I always knew it as Schenectady County Community College, but I did a 2-year degree there, but it took me 4 years because it took a while to figure things out. So that's a message to you as well too, is try to figure out what you want to do, and if it takes a little bit longer, that's okay. I know now, and we'll talk a little bit more later, engineers, it's like 4-year degrees they call it, but a lot of engineers will take 5 years just to bone up on math and just do some other things. So, you know, if it takes 5 years, that's fine. So whatever it takes, everybody has a different journey, a different path. And so don't get too hung up on any particular time schedules or what your friend is doing. You know, they may graduate before you. That's okay. There's no harm or no foul if you do it a little later. Union College after Schenectady Community College, and then in terms of that, Union, I say 3 times, 3X. I did the hat trick. You guys do hockey? I did the hat trick there. I actually got 3 degrees there. I did my first degree, and that was civil engineering. They used to have a civil engineering department, and it was the oldest in the United States. That they decided to get rid of and go higher tech. So now they have, I don't know, I forgot exactly what the department is now, but they don't have the civil engineering degree anymore there, which is unfortunate. But I got a civil engineering degree there, and then I ended up getting a mechanical engineer there later at nights, and then I got a scholarship to go there. And then finally, I did end up getting an MBA there, a business degree as well too, but that was at nights later on. University of Utah, Diane mentioned I live in Utah, so for those folks, you folks that are going to go to college, I hope most, if not all of you go. It's not for everybody, but I do encourage people to go. It's a really good place to check things out and find yourself. But if you do go to college, don't be shy to go other places. I went to Utah, and it was one of the best experiences I had in my life. It was just a different college, a different location, different people, different... Oh, it was more diverse backgrounds. They have a lot of people there that, out in Utah, University of Utah, they have a lot of people from Samoa and from other places that go there. So it's just a really good experience. So if you guys can get to another university outside of New York, nothing against New York. You know, you can go to Union, you can go to RPI, but it is, for some people, it is good to have that additional experience. I do have a varied engineer, EN. If you see EN, it's a shorthand for engineering. I do have a varied engineering career outside of the academics. As I mentioned, kind of a fairly good wealth of academics. I did work at a number of places. I worked at a spin-off company in this location for 5 years, a little materials lab that was spun off out of General Electric. So people that were laid off General Electric, they started their own lab. It was out of Scotia. I worked there for 5 years in their Corporations Park. Did a lot of work for the folks that are at GE R&D. They would come and they were our customers, so that was good. Then after that, I worked at Boeing in Seattle for a couple, 2.5 years. So Boeing, excellent experience. If any of you folks can decide that you want to work for a large company, Boeing is fantastic. Really good company, and they do things worldwide. So again, it's global. The way we do business is global nowadays, so it's worldwide, and Boeing definitely embraces that globalization as well as multicultural, etc. So it's diversity as well too. So that's definitely a good thing. And then now I'm with the Air Force, United States Air Force. This is my 17th year. And I am a manager or a chief engineer. I'm chief engineer for one of the aircraft, which is called T-38. And I'll talk about that later, but the T-38 is a trainer aircraft, so the pilots, you guys know that movie Top Gun, you know, Maverick, Goose, and all those guys. You know, they got to start somewhere, so they start in their training career. I do one of the jets. It's called T-38 Talent. And it's 60 years old, so it's kind of amazing that they still have this jet that's 60 years old flying around. They are working on a new trainer right now, but it's a multi-billion-dollar acquisition. So it's going to take a little while, so we got to work hard. Folks that I work with have to work hard to keep the aircraft safe. So that's what we do, and especially it's like a 60-year-old aircraft. So think about it. Think if you guys had a lot of the aircraft that were built, I think the average one was built, some of them were built in 1961, that I'm working on, me and my team. It is, it's out there. And then some of them, on average, were built, like say, 1967. So think about it. I mean, think about if you had a 1967 car in your garage, and you always had to keep it safe, and you always had to keep it running. And you always had to get parts for it, and trust me, you just don't go to Napa and get parts. You have to special order and do all kinds of cartwheels and gymnastics to get the parts, and sometimes, unfortunately, you do some belly flops because the parts aren't available. So you have to do some things to keep it going. Next here, so really, crux of the thing, if anybody's interested in an engineering career, I would highly recommend it. I think it's, to me, it's a really good career because it's challenging. You get to use different skills that a lot of other people don't use. So, for example, one of the key things that engineers do is you're a problem solver. So if you're a problem solver, or if you're kind of geared or wired to kind of helping people and try to help solve problems, try to be in a team environment, then engineering might be for you. It is a mix of many talents as well too. So math, a lot of people will talk about math and say, hey, look, you have to do higher order math for engineering. Yes, that is a true statement. So you have to take calculus. Who takes calculus here? So some folks take calculus. And that'll come after geometry trig, right, and calculus, and then you have to take differential equations. It's kind of fun if you like doing puzzles, but it's not simple. So that's one thing you'll have to be involved with. Other things, you'll have to do some technical writing. You'll have to be able to work in a team environment. You'll have to be able to work in a diverse team environment. They call them IPTs now, integrated product teams. So you'll have to be doing that type of things. As far as what type of engineering you can do. So an engineer is not an engineer. I mean, everybody thinks, oh, he or she or they are just engineers. Well, there's different subcategories. So you can do aerospace, like I do, work on aircraft. You can also be mechanical. Some of us folks here have done prior mechanical work. Chemical engineering, to work with chemicals. You know, like, I don't know, it's just a lot of different things in that realm. And then computer engineers, a lot of people probably know a lot about that now, because everybody's on the grid, most everybody, right? And as far as that, you know, computer engineers, just in your face every day, right? We're all dealing with computer stuff. And then civil engineer, you can do that, and that's large construction. Maybe you could do home construction. Maybe you could be a licensed engineer and stamp drawings and designs and things for people's houses. And just a lot more things that engineers do. So it's a varied career. And there's a lot of opportunity where everybody in this room, there's a really good opportunity you can find your niche in engineering. So that's good. As far as really quick, is there any questions up to this point? Go ahead.
So were you an aerospace engineer when Boeing hired you?
Yes, I was a senior stress analyst. And actually, that's the first time, though. When I hired on Boeing, that's the first time I was actually called an aerospace engineer. Prior to that, it was just various other titles, staff engineer or something. But once I started getting into Boeing, then it was definitely, because I was working on that product, it was definitely aerospace, and then that's kind of where it went.
So your aerospace background was from the University of Utah?
It was, really, because even in my, and that's a good question, when I did my doctorate, it was paid for by Boeing, and so they were the customer in a sense. And so anyways, the project that I worked on had to do with materials for the aerospace engineers, like on 777s. Materials used on 747, 777, 737, so we did some testing and evaluation analysis on that. So yes. Any other questions? Yes.
You worked for GE?
I never work directly for General Electric, but I worked for a spin-off company, and so.
Do you ever have a pension?
I have a pension now, but they are rare, and that's a really good question because I am getting kind of old now, and so I'm kind of thinking about these pension things, trying to get my 401k as fat as possible. And so these type of questions are really good because, like, I kid you not, when I first started engineering, people would talk about pensions. I'm like, what's that? Why is the older people so focused on it? Now, fast forward 20 years later, it's like, whoa, you know, it's kind of silly. I never even really thought about it. back when I was in my 20s and 30s. So it's really good to think about it. Right now, it's pretty rare to get a pension. Governments still have pensions. I have a pension, or half pension, with the Air Force as a civilian. But General Electric, they, I heard, got rid of their pension. Boeing got rid of their pension. So what they do is they bump up the TSP, or they bump up the 401k contribution sometimes to kind of make up for the pension, but that's it. By the way, I got a couple of shirts to hand out, and again, it's for folks that do questions. I got some, make sure I get the men and women's, but you're the first one that gets the shirt. By the way, if they don't fit, it's, I just, like when I went online, I just said, hey, look, I got men's large and then women's large, and they seemed to be a little short when they came, but here's yours.
What does it say?
Okay, you want to read this, or?
I'm an engineer to save time, just assume I'm always right.
Yeah, here, say it louder. Own it. Own it.
I'm an engineer to save time. Let's just assume I'm always right.
Yeah. So that's the way to go. So here's the I have more of these. I have more of these, so don't be shy to ask questions. And again, my apologies. If they don't fit, that's okay. You can always re-gift them. That's good, right? You can give it to your little brother or little sister or whatever, right? Okay, so why be an engineer? Again, personal choice. Again, challenges. A lot of people like challenges. And then it is rewarding to see. Some people like to design stuff and want to see it, and then if you're fortunate enough, you're able to maybe work with a company where you actually do design something, but then you see it, the project work its way through the acquisition and through the build. And so that's kind of cool. You can see something you designed. Question?
Was like creating when creating like computer stuff like graphics card, motherboard. Would that be considered as engineering?
Absolutely. So nowadays people like to do things on the computer first. So in olden days, like for when they made cars in Detroit, they didn't have computers, and they still do make cars in Detroit, but when it was like most cars were made in Detroit, back in those days, they used to have clay models and other types of models. Now they do computer, which is 3D. And the thing is just think about it. Wouldn't it be a lot easier to just go and click a couple buttons on a computer and change something, as opposed to going and shaving off clay on a like large-scale model of olden day Corvette? So that's just how it is. So computer is very important, and it's a really key thing for all engineers. So even myself, I don't do too much modeling myself. I guess if I was going to model, I'd have to lose a lot of weight and become more handsome if I was going to model. So it's not in my career path, but that's a good question. Let's see if I got one for you. Maybe we can see what yours says.
Engineer, I try to keep making better.
Loud for the back of the room.
Engineer, I try to make things idiot-proof, but they keep making better idiots.
That's good info too.
Cool and values.
Oh, you did?
So, question of medical engineering. Probably have to start off, maybe, it depends, you could start off at a community college, and then take some science type courses, maybe take some chemistry type courses. Obviously, you'd be getting with your advisor. Then after you get a foundation, then usually, and this is what happens with most fields, usually you start off for the first 2 years, maybe getting a foundation built up. And sometimes they may have you work an extra half year or a year to maybe get an extra math course or an extra chemistry course. Then usually when you're a junior and senior, that's when you focus on your specific. So whether it's biomed or whether it's maybe pure chemistry or maybe it's aerospace engineering and so forth. So that's where oftentimes with a 4-year degree, or bachelor's degree where you'll focus. And there's some schools that are like really keyed towards certain things. Like University of Utah, for example, they are big time into robots. They like robotics, right? So they're heavy into that. They're also heavy, they actually are into ergonomics and bio. So University of Utah has a program. And I taught adjunct for University of Utah for 11 years. So I taught mostly mainstream mechanical engineering type of things. So I didn't get into specialty so much. Answer your question?
Yeah. Thank you.
Let's see what we got here. Let's see. I don't know, some of them have the same sayings. Oh, here, you can say this out loud maybe, if you don't mind.
Engineer, I'm not arguing, I'm just explaining why I'm right.
Okay.
Mike, do you want to finish your presentation first, and then we'll take questions? I promise you'll go first. Your hand was up first, and then do this.
But I
Okay?
think
Do you
really
want to
quick,
take one question first?
yeah, from
and then-
our lady friend in there, because I got women's t-shirts, I got to start giving them up.
Does your job allow you to have like a lot of free time outside of work?
I'll actually talk about that in a minute, but it's a super good question because the thing is a lot of people are like, hey, you got your life outside of work.
Yeah.
And in fact, there's a guy that I work with, very, very wise man, and he said the only regrets he had was, you know, sometimes he wished he spent a little bit more time with his daughters. In other words, he was always at work and doing stuff, and he said, you know, now that he's retired, he kind of wished he did. So there is life outside of work. So let's see. Oh, you get a woman's version of the idiot-proof one. So that's it. So, but there is other ones. Oh, how's that? And then,
You want to read it?
Engineer, I try to make things idiot-proof, but they keep making them idiots.
They keep making it better. Why don't we get through the presentation, and then we'll have plenty of time for questions.
Yeah, or maybe let me get through a couple slides, and then we'll have a question and so forth. And I am looking at the time. So again, why be an engineer? Again, challenges, rewarding to see things, and then really to be cool and a value contributor to society. So my sister mentioned something, and then her colleagues about diversity and so forth. When I worked at Boeing, super diverse, people from all over the world, you name it. It's at Boeing, and they embrace it. There's no question. And they got their supply chain is global. So if you work at Boeing, oftentimes you'll be traveling to France, Italy, Asia, places to go to work with a team, multifunctional team, integrated product team, and so forth. So it is kind of cool. And when I talked to my friend when I worked there, he was from India, and he was an older guy. He had come over in the 70s to work on the 747. So he was retiring when I was like mid-career, and he said that in India, if you're an engineer, that's kind of like being that's up there. So engineers in India and other societies are really high status jobs, high status. U.S. is probably pretty good, you know, mainstream. I wouldn't say it's super high status. It's up there though. But he said, oh, in India and places of that nature, it's just really looked high upon. So depending on where you are, it is pretty cool. And you're also a valued contributor to society. So that's really the key thing, is you're actually doing things to help people and help the world. So big question, big message here. Who could be an engineer? Anybody. So anybody in this room, no question about it. Anybody in this room can be an engineer. Really, you got to have those 3 A's. You got to have the attitude, aptitude, and ability. So there is an element of ability, but really, if you work hard at it, it's pretty good. You do have to have a little bit of money for tuition, but there are some ways, like Diane had mentioned, that, you know, hey, some people can start with humble backgrounds, but folks with humble backgrounds can still go to college and get, whether it's engineers or even business degrees, you just have to have drive, you have to have focus, and you do have to sacrifice a little bit. So, I mean, instead of having pizza every night, maybe have it once every week. Or instead of just buying that new car, maybe you buy a used car, or so on and so forth. So you might have to sacrifice some things, but in the long run, it'll actually work out. Again, we talked about this earlier, but a bachelor's degree to start. A lot of times nowadays, they are looking for master's degrees as well. So you made it through 4, maybe 5 years to get your bachelor's degree, and then all of a sudden now you have to get a master's degree and do it all over again. And it's the nature of things nowadays, and that's just how things are kind of going. But it is a challenge, and it makes you, does expand your brain cells, so it does challenge you, so that's always good. And then again, support from families and friends, and that's really key as well too. So if you have a good family network, they can really help you through, so that's good. Next. Oh, sorry. Brain cramp there. As far as compensation, so you guys, Jerry Maguire, show me the money. Show me the money, right? You guys know about that? You know, if you're doing this, you work really hard. So it's not trivial for most people. The vast majority of people, it's not trivial to get a degree. It's a lot of sweat equity, it's a lot of money, it's a lot of sacrifice. So you kind of want to get compensated for your, what you did, your efforts to get there. So again, like I say, in the middle, you want a house, you want a car, you want a dog, you want a significant other, you want all this stuff, right? So stuff costs a little bit of scratch, right? You need a little bit of money. So some people are really saying, hey, look, what's in it for me? And again, some people, and I'll talk in a minute, have expensive hobbies as well, too. My sister Diane and myself, we have a sister Beverly who used to own horses. And that's not cheap. So she has expensive hobbies. And then, so really, starting salaries are pretty good in terms of engineers. So for
What are
me,
they? Do we know?
I'm going to show in a minute.
Oh, okay.
But as far as for me, make sure I didn't skip something, but if you have passions, and if you have hobbies, and then somebody mentioned something about life outside. So I got to drop some weight again to do this again, but I used to be probably, 30, 40 pounds thinner about 5 years ago, and I used to do a lot of mountain climbing, mountaineering, So that over there on the left is in France, that's in Chamonix.
That's a picture of you.
It is. And that's in Chamonix in France, and I was there on a guided trip, so, you get enough money as an engineer, and you do get some time. And so I was there, and then over there on the right was when I was in Alaska. That's pretty close to Mount Denali. That's the highest mountain in North America. We were just doing some technical climbing. But that is our taxi right there, which is an aircraft with skis on it. So you can get time off and you get some money and you can follow some of your passions. So that was pretty cool. So we just landed on this big glacier. By the way, that was in Ruth Gorge, and the ice is 5,000, it's either 4,000 or 5,000 feet thick. And what's kind of cool about it for rock climbing and mountaineering is, you guys know Yosemite, California? With the ice there, the walls, the rock walls are all scoured by glacier. They're as high as Yosemite, but then they got another 4,000 feet of glacier. So if the glacier's melted, then there'd be like a 9,000-foot wall. It's pretty crazy. So that's just things you can do as an engineer. And so it's kind of cool. There was a quick question. Somebody had a quick question. Go ahead.
So with engineering, is there something that every type is taught? So something that
Like classes that all engineers do? Yes. So that's a good question. So is there like core type of questions that everybody does? And the answer is yes. In fact, there's a professional engineering, like I'm a professional engineer, have a license. There's other people that get that. Electrical engineer, 68 grand. I'm looking at this column right here. And then if you are a mechanical engineer, 64, 65,000, so it's not too bad. It's a pretty good scratch, right? Question? It can be. Architect. So the question is being an architect like being an engineer? And the answer is, yeah, it can be. It's a little bit different field, but architects are allied with engineers and they work closely with them. So there is some courses architects take that engineers do as well too.
Do you have a question?
So, yeah, and again, here's
We're gonna
one
go back
for you.
here.
It might have the same thing, and again, it's just why you're always right. He's always right.
Do you have a question back here?
Question?
So if I want to become like an aerospace engineer, should I major in like mechanical or aerospace?
Actually, it depends, because what happens, and that's a really good question, and I'll explain in a second, is oftentimes you'll start in a degree, and then you get a job somewhere, and then you kind of morph into the other degree. So you may have a mechanical engineering background, then you end up being aerospace like me, but you kind of morph into it by where you work and by on-the-job training in a sense. And there's always classes that you take, whether you're at Boeing or whether in the Air Force, there's always classes that you take extra that you may not get a degree in. So that's it. And by the way, running on a men's shirt, we got to get some women to ask a couple questions. Here's a shirt. Was that yours? Sorry about that.
Do you have a question? Or are you just stretching?
Okay, I got a special shirt.
Hang on one second. Nice and loud.
So like college and stuff, like how many like say like you want to how many classes you take like in a day about? Like is it like three schedules like more crowded or like in a day in college?
No, engineers will take, so I think the question is like, is there more
How
classes
rigorous
or
is
how
that?
rigorous?
Yeah.
I'd say it's more, same amount of classes, it's just more concentrated. So the material is just harder to like wrap your brain around. So like you'll take these courses that are, but it's challenging and it's rewarding. Because once you figure out and you get it, you're like, wow, I solved that. Finally, it took so much work, but I solved it. So that's kind of what we're doing. So here's, pardon me, here's your shirt. You can read it. Did I answer your question? Yeah, so same courses, they're just concentrated. You're going to have to read this. Loudly, please.
Forget principles that I want to
Are women really, in your life, in your career span, have you seen women really come into engineering fields over your time? Is it?
So, question about women and engineering is, yes, they're coming in a little bit more, but not as much as I'd like to see. I'd like to see 50-50 myself personally. Right now, it's quite a bit less than that, but it's coming up. I don't have any reasons why. I've asked a lot of women that I work with professionally, hey, how come you guys are here and you got a good salary? By the way, they still have their kids, and they still have a life and they still good, but it's just various reasons. I never got a reason why or why not, but it's coming slowly but surely. It's coming where there's more women. I will tell you though, so I taught and I work with women. Absolutely the best. So I used to do lab in these classes. Absolutely the best lab reports and the best writing and absolutely the best, pretty much the best work, usually women. Absolutely. I mean, super articulate, super good, well
It's all that
thought through.
emotional intelligence that women
It's just all there. So,
do. Right?
and then, working with as well too. So it's just excellent. I've had super good experience.
Do you want to just, because we have, about
12 minutes.
12 minutes. Go through your slides and then we'll take questions. Okay.
So,
I love all the. I love the interactiveness and the excitement about it.
So last thing on this. So I talked about starting salaries. So probably somewhere in the 60s range nowadays. And again, it depends where you live.
So what's a teacher's starting salary? Just so for comparison's sake? So low 40s.
Yeah,
So 40s compared to 60s. So that's how, gives you a little bit of a, kind of a comparison about just different salary ranges. I think master's level social workers start in the mid-30s.
So it's, but it's hard work, as we all know, but it's rewarding. And also, do note, though, that later, when you actually have a senior part of your career, you're going to make well over $100,000, or you can. So people that work in my organization, I'd say majority of them have been there over 10 years, maybe even 15. They make $100,000 or above. And that's in Utah, which is cost of living is not so bad. Seattle area, it's even higher, but the price of housing up there and all the above is like probably twice or 3 times as much price up there. I'm going to bounce through and
You have about 12 minutes.
so again, talked about travel and things of that nature. A lot of jobs require some travel, so if you want to see the world, it's pretty good. Boeing, General Electric, multinational companies I've talked to. Air Force has international partners, so people that work in my organization, a couple of them just came back from Bahrain. Some of them go to Turkey, some of them go to Spain, so they go all over the place. So that's it. As far as what type of projects, so now there's job careers, but there's projects. You can work on aircraft, you can work on the space, rockets, you can work on automobiles, computers and networks, robots, work on robots, networks. By the way, law, if you got a penchant for law, if you want to get, you can be a patent attorney. So that's a good career. It's a lot of extra education, but boy, that could be rewarding, financially and otherwise. And then public work, so you can work with that. My current projects, so these are things I work on. So T-38 is that trainer aircraft on the upper left. That's the aircraft I work on. Believe it or not, it's a nice, sleek, beautiful looking jet, but they are 60 years old. And then F-5, I work on that as well too. That's a sister of the T-38. That's still flying. That down there is a big mod program. It's hard to read this, but it says T-38 mod program. And I don't know if you guys watch The Office. That's another part of my job. It's another part of my job is I'm a chief engineer, so I manage a bunch of people. It's my pleasure. You know, we work together as a team, but
Is that where your MBA,
it
getting
helps.
a degree in business helps?
Actually, having a sister as a social worker helps. Osmosis. But yeah, having those kind of things helps a little bit.
What's the F-5?
F-5 is, it's a fighter jet. It was a sister of the T-38. So just to finish off, I actually have some final thoughts. And then again, engineering and any math science is really a good career choice. So make sure if you're interested, even remotely interested, it's a really good. You can't really, if you're willing to spend the sweat equity, sacrifice the time and so forth, you can't go wrong. It's really a good, solid career. You know, you'll do pretty good. You'll have kind of interesting, challenging jobs. You'll get some pretty good pay, compensations. It's a respectable careers and all those kind of things. And you'll have some time to yourself. No regrets. By the way, somebody asked time, how much time? I'm with the Air Force, and I get every pay period, which is 2 weeks, I get 8 hours off. So I get 26 days off a year. But that's the Air Force, and that's the government, military side, and so that's a little more generous than the outside. Like a lot of companies, to start, you'll get 2 weeks off with pay, and then you have to earn it, like by seniority, or you have to, like you work 5 more years, they might give you another day or two. You work 10 years, they might give you another week, and so forth. So it takes a while, but Air Force is very generous time-wise. Although this is only my third, my third day off this year. I have to like eat a bunch of days because it's like Oh yeah, real busy. No regrets from me, engineering, or you won't have any. It's a really good lifestyle. It's pretty cool. You can travel and do a number of interesting things. Challenges do keep you thinking, so your brain can enjoy it. You can really help people in society. And then there is also a mix with engineering, with law, or Diane mentioned business. And then there's like the global aspect to be working with people all over the place. So it's really good career, good solid career. You can't go wrong. So and it's not just even if it's not just engineering, you can do physics, or even if you do math. Those are things that kind of tie in as well too. So that's basically what I got. So any questions?
Is that Jim Carrey's
George,
Riddler?
Mr. Riddler, Mr. Bewley, do you want to choose some kids from your engineering classes?
Oh, she got it.
Yeah, I got one.
Yeah.
Oh, you did? Okay.
I guess that woman next to her.
Right back here. No, right back here. Ben.
What was the original engineering degree that you got at TC?
So at Schenectady Community College, it's called something different now, but I got a 2 years associate degree at community college in like math science. So it's really like a STEM type degree, which was good, but there was questions earlier about what do you do to start your first couple of years, and it was a good foundation for me at the community college. So again, it's kind of a plug for the community college for folks that if you want to test the waters and you want to do it where it's not super expensive and as risky, community college is a great place to start. So I started at community college and I ended up getting my way into Union College. And then there's scholarships. I lucked out at Union College, I got scholarships, so that was good. So that was my first degree, and then after that I went to Union College, got my 4-year degree. Question?
Either of you want to ask questions? You're both. Go ahead.
She gets a shirt.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know that you said that it was depends on the economy, but for your first job, did you have any connections prior to getting it, or an internship, or did you just?
No, but that's a good question. Connections do help sometimes, and then internships are a great way as well too. Mine was a little bit luck of the draw. I put in my name in the hat on a couple of career fairs, and I ended up getting a call from this one company, and then I interviewed, and then I ended up getting a job, and that was up in Glens Falls. So it was just one of these things. But that's pretty standard as well too. But knowing folk does help some people, but not everybody. So, question?
Let's do another women, because I want to do the women shorts better.
How old were you when you want to go to aerospace?
When I wanted to go to aerospace?
Yeah.
So when I did my PhD and I started leaning towards aeronautical or aerospace, I was in my early 30s. I was 32 at the time. So I did stint as a structural engineer before that, and then other stuff. And by the way, I started college a little bit late. I was kind of, I don't know, how do you say it then? I was 18 for about 5 years.
He is kind of unfocused.
Yeah, but
Uncertain about what he wanted to do.
yeah, and so I just kind of bounced around. So that can happen as well too. But when I got my focus and I started saying, hey, I got to buckle down, I was in my earlier to mid 20s, starting to dabble at the community college and so forth. So if you want to take a year or two and find yourself or do some things, there's no harm in that or shame in that either. Question in the back? Sorry.
During your career, did you ever have to do any kind of programming on the planes of some sort?
No, I didn't. So myself personally, I did not have to program any aircraft. There are teams of people that do that. And even people that do it, there's checks and balances, and they have to go through tests, and they have to go through all kinds of reviews. But I didn't happen to work on that, no. It wasn't my core skill set. Question?
You mentioned travel a few times. How was that?
So the question is travel, how does it affect family and so forth? And obviously it does because sometimes, like in the Air Force, people will move and sometimes you'll have a 2 or 3 year assignment and people move to Germany and then you have to bring your family or at least that'd be a consideration. Some people I know went to Japan or at Okinawa, places of that nature. So, and it's just it's a lifestyle choice. It just depends on the personality. It depends on your family and so forth. But it can have a huge impact. But you can always say no. I mean, in a lot of jobs, they just. You ever hear of vote with your feet? So what I mean by vote with your feet is that if you don't like a job or if it's too intense or it's just not your right fit, then you walk out the door, right? You vote with your feet. That's an olden day expression. You had to be there. Sorry.
I do think we have to wrap up at this point. You were a great audience tonight, and I really want to thank you because this is a very special and proud day for me. So we, in the spirit of shirts, we got Michael Blinn a shirt.